Questions on your assignments from yesterday? Okay, so okay. On Friday, consider it required that you attend the presentations for each other. You should come and support people who have prepared something to teach you. Okay, so considered it required. All right, we're going to talk about healthy diet today. What do you think it means by a healthy diet? What does that mean when that term is spoken?
Grown.
Say it again.
Grown, not processed.
Grown, not processed, okay.
Well-rounded. I think
Pardon? Balanced in terms of what?
I guess what is another good way to put it, but I don't know, all your nutrients coming from, not like just all carbs or all, some people get, there's a fad diets where people get a bunch of protein, but they also get a bunch of fat and no carbs. There's also people that eat carbs all day and they don't eat any type of protein or leafy greens, get vitamins, minerals, things like that.
Okay, so we could say from all the food groups and we get a good balance of all the macronutrients. Okay, good. There were other comments.
Eating at the right time,
Pardon?
like eating at appropriate times.
Okay, how would that go to health?
Like, I feel like if you eat a bunch at night, you're just gonna store it and it's not beneficial to you really.
Okay, so maybe fueling the body throughout the day is what you're saying. Okay, others?
Meeting your nutritional needs.
Meeting the nutritional needs. Okay, good. What else? What about for kids? What would that mean?
Wide variety.
Wide variety, going back to what Ron said, yes, meeting nutrition. What do kids have that you don't, or need that you don't right now? Growth, so you want normal growth. Okay, calcium is a specific. Also brain development. You may also feel like you're in that category, but they are developing their brain and central nervous system is in the process of developing. Okay, good, you hit many of those. Most of what we're going to cover today reflects the dietary guidelines that come out every 5 years. These are important because they set the kind of the standard in the country for what good nutrition is. And where that impacts is all the government programs that you will soon as taxpayers be supporting. These are billions of dollars a year that are spent in these areas. One of the big ones is the food stamp program. It's now called SNAP, or Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Lots of school lunch programs in terms of for low income, but now many schools supply it for everybody, breakfast and lunch. And they do it in the summer because they find that there are kids who won't get food over the summertime. So you see those up there. There's a lot of things that are directed to seniors. So what you'll see is that, at least for the government standpoint, they kind of hit the age ranges, those who are at the most risk, kids and the elderly. And in the middle, they assume that you can work or get food through other means, even though there are assistance for those folks as well. They come more through private. The food stamp program doesn't usually do a lot to supplement an entire diet. For people who qualify, they're usually a supplement or an emergency fund. We'll talk about that more on Friday. You see the milk program, which is in the grade schools. The commodities that go to different identified groups. So these guidelines set those, what those groups have to meet or supply. The other is that listed down there is they also guide industry. Tells the industry what is the standard. So as we phased out trans fats, that has affected the industry. We'll talk about trans fats a little bit later. They also guide state health promotion. So if the government says, or this group, or these guidelines come out and say you need 5 to 9 vegetables and fruits in a day, that's what the state adopts, and that's what you'll see the state of Oklahoma and most states adopt that recommendation. So well, that's how these guidelines are very pervasive, so they're important, and they reflect in these things, in policy, and then somewhat in what we will as providers promote to patients. Let's see. Okay, so if you look at the key of healthy eating patterns, here are the general guidelines that come out. These are their main 5 points. Choose a healthy eating pattern across lifespan. You all alluded to that. The biggest thing you'll see in the guidelines over and over again is a healthy weight. They don't say ideal body weight, they don't say a skinny body weight. They mostly say what is healthy, because what is right for, or one thing doesn't fit everyone. So what promotes health? Also supporting nutrient adequacy. So that changes over the lifespan for kids, for middle-aged adults, and then the elderly. And reducing the risk of chronic disease. So thinking diabetes, cardiovascular, thinking the more neurologic diseases have data now behind them in terms of what promotes health. Osteoporosis. So those kinds of things going towards age, which it takes longitudinal good practices to prevent or reduce the incidence of. Focus on variety, you all talked about that. Nutrient density, I'm going to show you what that means. We'll talk about what is a nutrient dense food versus not. And then all food groups. Limit calories from added sugars. So the new labels are going to help us because they're going to show us what has been added to sweeten. So for years we focused on salt, added salt, added salt, added salt. So everybody's radar was up and looking for that. And we taught people don't add salt to your food because processed foods usually have a lot of salt anyway. Now it's become on sugar because we went through a time period for a number of years where the focus was on low fat, low fat, low fat, low fat. So where are you going to get your calories if you aren't eating fat? You're going to go to carbs for the most part. They're cheap. Protein's expensive for some proteins, not all. But so the carbs went that way. So what happened to us? We got fatter, and our risk of diabetes went up, and our rates went up. Some of that is due to the low-fat, high-carb. Now we've shifted back. So it just always shifts because people think there's a golden diet out there that will solve all problems, but it won't. Okay, so limiting calories from added sugars, saturated fats, so not all fats, but at least the ones that tend to cause us the most trouble. Saturated fats are most linked to what disease? Cardiovascular, right. Because that is the raw material that the body will use to make more cholesterol. Your body can make all the cholesterol you need, but if you get a bit more raw material, it will make more. So that's why the saturated fats and the reducing sodium intake. We'll see a little bit later in the handout. Oops. Sodium and blood pressure go this way. As your sodium goes up, blood pressure, it's a linear relationship. So that's one of the reasons why to decrease salt intake. Shift to healthier foods and beverage choices. This is what you'll find when you're dealing with patients for the most part, is getting them to shift. I would say one of the biggest, most popular shifts that came probably 20 years ago is moving from whole milk to skim milk. So all the way in between, you've got whole, 2%, 1%, there is even a 0.5%, and then skim milk. So it was easier to start to tell people is to shift your taste down, move from 4% to 2%. So the percentage refers to what in milk? Butterfat. Okay, it's more the saturated fat part. So moving it down gets rid of that fat part. So that was one way we got people to shift. So sometimes it's easier to get people to shift in small increments because it will taste different. Have you ever moved from whole milk to skim milk? It doesn't taste the same. It doesn't coat your tongue. It tastes like water. Or at the VA they called it blue milk because it has sometimes it'll have that bluish tinge to it. Tasted like water to them. Well, of course it did, because you took all the fat out. So getting people to incrementally change is important. Beverage choices. I think that one of the changes that you're seeing now is they're adding a little bit of sugar back to sodas, and it's because of the taste, and getting people to leave 150 calories of sugar, moving them down to 10 is better than drinking all regular soda. That's my opinion. It could be for other reasons. Considering cultural and personal preference is important. If it's not culturally appropriate or sensitive to what a person does, they're probably not going to move that way. So understanding how they cook, what foods they choose, and getting them to move that way is important. So when I deal with the Hispanic population, it's a huge carbohydrate intake. So getting them to shift is hard. When you're used to eating 6 tortillas at every meal, then you can't ask them to go to 0. So incrementally making choices. Supporting healthy eating patterns for all. So what they're talking there is in all places, all venues. So one of the changes you've seen is that in vending machines. So they've started moving to at least offering some healthy foods in vending machines and some calorie and nutrient choices so people can figure out what to get out of a vending machine. That would be one example. Any others that you think about as you're trying to get your brain kind of going this morning? If you'll talk, it will probably be easier. So what else? What do you see, what comes to mind as we go through these?
Restaurants do that too.
How so?
I've just seen them offer, like they have the little labels that you can find a key for at the bottom. Can't think of a specific.
Oh, yeah,
Like
yeah.
low sodium or
Yes.
something like that.
Yes,
They'll
or
have
under 600 calories.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that frightful? For, I think for women, young, or small women, looking at 600 calories, to me, that's a big meal. So having those identified, because then when you look at everything else on that menu is above 600 calories, either eat part of it or avoid it. Okay, let's go on to page 3 then. So components of a healthy eating pattern. So when you talk about diet or food with people, you have to kind of get into their terminology of how they use food, or how they term food. So a big wake-up call for me was when I worked at the VA is that, and I think I've told you all this before when we talked about diabetes, is that meals to them had energy and calories if they conceptualized it that way. But snacks didn't count. So if I asked them, tell me what you eat, the snacks never got figured in there. And after a while, I figured it out. I also figured out if I asked about dinner, that might mean the end of meal, or it might mean the Sunday lunch meal. Lunch meant a different word. Supper meant a different word. So getting and figuring out how they eat and what they call it is important. But everything you put in your mouth counts. So people don't always equate what they drink as part of their caloric intake. When I was at the VA, it wasn't unusual for them to drink a gallon of milk every 2 days. But they didn't count that. I told you about the guy that worked on cars, and he was a big guy, and he came in and his wife said, he doesn't eat, he only eats supper. It's like, okay, you're at least 225, you're 6'2", you cannot exist just on supper. So that's when I found out that he was drinking about 1,800 calories in sugar and creamer throughout the day in all of his coffee, okay? If people tell you they go all day long without eating, start to look at what they're drinking. In the Family Medicine Center, I found a lot of times people were drinking soda all day long and killing their appetite, and then they would eat one meal, okay? So usually people are being sustained in some way. Either they're doing an oral glucose load constantly. Some people can get by with eating very little at one time of the day, but it's not usual. If people are maintaining a body size, that's why I'm telling you, look at the person, look at what you weighed them. Now you have a way to quickly calculate, or you will as we go through, about how many calories a day they need. If you'll just do 10 calories per pound, and think, okay, they need about 2,000 calories, then if they're only reporting to you about 500 calories a day, there's something missing, okay? The bigger people are, usually the more they underestimate their caloric intake. Overweight and obese people usually underestimate their intake by about 40%. People that are skinnier and closer to their ideal body weight underestimate by 20%. So that can be sizable in a day. Healthy eating patterns include, and if, as you go down this list, you can think of you all know the food pyramid, you're at least somewhat familiar with that. It's kind of the inversion of the food pyramid. So at the base, it's the vegetables and the fruits and the grains. Those should be the basis of a healthy diet. And then you go up into the dairy, protein, and then at the end, at the top, fat. So lower fat dairy, whole grains, variety of protein. We're going to talk through each of these as we go through, and then the oils at the top. Healthy eating patterns should limit saturated fats and trans fats, and we'll talk about those also in more detail. Added sugars and sodium. So that's where the labeling comes in, and people can start to at least monitor their own intake or make choices between products. The other recommendations that are quantitative, so they put an amount on them, are listed there below. So less than 10% of calories from added sugar. Less than 10% of calories from saturated fats. So if we look at a diet and we're looking at macronutrients, then at least half should be from carbs. And there's a variety of ways to get those. And then we want about 20% from protein and about 30% from fat. And of this pie, we only want 10% of them to come from saturated fats. Okay? So you're going to do that when you assess your own nutrition intake, as you will look at those macronutrient, how you line up with that. The other is alcohol consumed. So the recommendation is listed there. 1 drink for women. So a drink would be what? What's a drink or a beer limit? 12 ounces. What's wine?
5.
Yeah, it's about 6 to 8. You see it different places. And what about hard liquor? A shot. So then you look at for men and for women. Those are the recommendations. So why do we put those limits on alcohol?
It turns into sugar.
Okay, so it turns into something else. Alcohol is more metabolized like a fat. It goes that pathway, but it adds carbs, like beer will add a lot of carbohydrates. Why else?
Because then you're drinking your meal instead of having like a full composed.
Exactly. So it's like drinking soda. Look at your liquor bottles. There's no added vitamins or minerals. Okay. So you are replacing a nutrient deficit with, you're replacing nutrient or nutrient-dense foods with foods that have no nutrition value. So that's one of the reasons. The other are obvious and for health reasons long-term. Okay. So other dietary principles, going down to the last part of the page, is looking at nutrient-dense foods. So what does that mean? Anybody want to venture a guess? Boomy?
You get a lot of nutrients for a small amount of food.
Exactly. So let's look at some examples. So here's a comparison, an apple versus pretzels. So pretzels are promoted as a good choice over chips. So here's how they compare. If you look at so apple is a nutrient-dense food. So look at all the vitamins you get. Albeit it's small, it still adds. You get all the macronutrients, so small amount of protein, small amount of fat, mostly carbs, and a lot of minerals. Look at them: potassium, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, sodium, iron, zinc, manganese. Your vitamins, you got C and E, and then a lot of the B vitamins, and a little bit of A, a little bit of folate, a little bit of vitamin K. In about the proportion you need it in a day. Look at the pretzels. No fat, no cholesterol, mostly carbs, sugars, none, protein, very little, and none of or 2% iron. Okay? Same equivalent amount of calories, except the apple's a little bit less depending on the size, but a whole lot more nutrients packed in the product. Okay? So that's what we mean by nutrient dense. I think I have some others. Here's another one. Watermelon versus a can of soda. Similar in, well, not so, it depends on how you cut it, but 140 calories in the soda, 80 calories in the watermelon. Go down and look at sodium. You have no sodium in watermelon, unless you add salt, which I always do. And carb difference, 39 and 21. So a big difference there. But look at, I don't have all the others. Vitamin A, vitamin C, iron, and calcium. So again, more nutrient dense than once you get out of soda and about half the calorie. And there's a video that I've listed. I'm not going to show it to you today, but it's there if you want more information. Questions about those? The other is teaching patients about serving sizes, particularly if you deal with diabetes or if you are trying to get a sense of quantity that they are ingesting. So there's different ways to do it. I'll tell you what the healthy guidelines say. I think they're hard to teach to patients. I think they speak more to probably dietitians and people who deal with nutrition counseling. But they use an equivalent. They use an ounce or a cup equivalent. And when they do that, it means that usually more the caloric intake or the carbohydrate intake is similar between products. So look at our foods. So you may not be able to read this, but it says a half cup portion of green beans is a half cup equivalent of vegetable. So if they come out and say you need 6 cup equivalents of vegetables, then if you were using this system, that would give you at least a half a cup towards your goal. For raw vegetables, so this is cooked. For raw vegetables, it's a little bit different. A cup, so this is a half cup cooked. This is a cup of raw, is again a half a cup equivalent. We do the same when we teach patients about amount of carbs in vegetables. So a half a cup of that cooked carb, beans, is 5 grams of carbohydrate. In that cup of spinach, which is raw, is also 5 grams. So usually the cooked is going to be less than the raw. Then if you're looking at the fruits, so we have fresh fruits, we have fruit juices, we have dried fruit. So a half cup portion of strawberries is equal to a half cup equivalent. 3/4 cup a portion of 100% orange juice is a 3 cup. These are ridiculous. I don't know who came up with these. That for patients, what I'm telling you is not what I would teach a patient, but it shows you that about 1/4 of a cup of raisins, about a half a cup of juice, and a half a cup of raw vegetables or fruits, fresh fruit, is about the same in terms of nutrition density and also what it provides in terms of carbs and calories. Okay. So look at the servings down here. Here's another way to look at serving equivalents. So if someone was told you need to eat 4 or 5 servings of grains or fruits or vegetables at a meal, here's what they would be equivalent to. So a serving of bread is about 1 slice, or an ounce of ready-to-eat cereal, or a half a cup of cooked cereal, rice, pasta. So a half a cup of pasta cooked, about 1/3 of a cup of rice, half a cup of beans, those all have about the same calories, about the same carb makeup. For beans and legumes, it's the same. It's a half a cup. They will provide about the same amount of carbohydrates, calories, fiber. Vegetables. So a cup of raw vegetables is a serving, a half a cup of cooked is a serving. For fruits, across the board, it's a half a cup. So often I will I'll get folks in the beginning, if they're not doing, especially if we're moving towards weight loss, is to measure things. I'm always surprised at how many people don't have servings or don't have measuring cups or spoons in their house. So in diabetes clinic, we gave it out so that people will have them. But I think when you're training, if you've ever gone through like Weight Watchers, one of the things they do is they train you as to what is a serving size. So getting people to understand what a serving size looks like. If they're really overweight, they may have no sense of it. So you've seen the portion distortion. So over the years, it has just grown. Let me show you this. Let's go here. So look at 1950 versus now. Our burgers have moved from 2 ounces to 12 ounces. Our sodas have, 4 ounces to 12 ounces. Our sodas have moved from 7 to 42. Our fries have moved from 2.4 to 6.7. Okay. So this is a portion distortion. I love Panera, but their stuff is so calorically high. So this is a regular sandwich at Panera, ham and Swiss cheese, versus about a third of it is 250 calories, which is probably more reasonable. Women, young men who are in their 20s probably can eat that, and that's a good size meal for them, because they're needing 25 up to 3,500 calories a day. But if you're needing 1,500, then that's half your caloric intake in one day. So that's how the portions have been distorted. So your patients are going to look at that as a serving. Okay? I had a lady one time that came in, and when I listened to what she ate at McDonald's, I was just like overwhelmed. Like 2 or 3 hamburgers, and a large thing of fries, and a large thing of Coke. But for them, that's normal. So when I start talking to them about, here's what a portion looks like, because we have all these food models, and we would bring them out. Okay, tell me what you eat. You know, construct your meal so I can see it. And then you show them this is what it is. They are blown away. So that's where incrementalism comes. And also having people measure. So a bowl, if people tell you a bowl, that's a relative term. My son, a bowl is about this big. He gets out one of my mixing bowls and he throws all the Cheerios in it. But to me, a bowl is one of those very small bowls, and I measure it out. Anytime I'm starting to gain weight, I always go back to measuring. Measuring retrains your eye, and it helps you at least calorically if dieting is your goal, or losing weight is your goal. Sorry. The other, servings of meat, poultry, fish, dry beans, nuts. So we often use the palm of the hand, or a size of a deck of cards is about 3 ounces. So usually 2 of those in a day provides most of the protein needs for the average person. For beans, a very good source of protein would be a half a cup. And then peanut butter, 2 tablespoons. Very good source of protein and good fats. Milk, yogurt, cheese, 1 cup of a low-fat or a fat-free, half an ounce of fat-free or low-fat cheese. Okay? And I'll show you some other ways to look at those. So these are what serving sizes are. Okay? So if you're conversant with patients, this will help you. It also help you in teaching them or instructing them on how to reduce. This was the other portion distortion. So you can see the popcorn from the small to the large. You're almost tripling your calories. Bagels, huge. You can buy the small bagels, but you can look at the difference. So the 333 calories, if you ever go to Brahms and get their 1/6 hamburger, that's what that size is right there. There's about 300 calories in McDonald's just single hamburger. But when you go up to the, the quarter pounders, then you're getting up into the 500, 600, 700 calorie. Sodas, 8 ounce used to be, because my mother would let me collect the bottles. She wouldn't let us have sodas, but she would let us kind of stockpile them when we did get them in the glass, and they were all glass, and then we could turn them in for money at the supermarket. I think we got a penny a bottle. And now we have 20 ounce bottles. Okay, so huge changes. So if people are not well versed in nutrition or portion sizes or calorie intake, for them, this has become the norm. Okay, so moving them back will help in terms of health and weight maintenance or weight loss. Questions about those? Comments? Okay, so what does a serving look like? So you can get handouts that you can give to people. I was looking through this last night and I thought how some of it's outdated for you all in terms of things that they've used. But you can use either the hand, let me show you that one first. You can use the hand to show people that when you're out, here's how you can figure out what a serving size is. So if you look at a fist is about a cup. The front of your fist is about a half a cup. So think about if you're going out and you're at Olive Garden and you've ordered spaghetti and meatballs. This is half a cup. That is a serving. This would be like 2 servings of pasta. Think about how they fill those plates. Okay. Some other would be your palm of your hand is, again, about 3 ounces of meat or a deck of cards. Your finger, the end of your finger is a teaspoon, and your thumb is a tablespoon. So these are easy ways to teach patients. I don't worry about the difference in men and women and their fist size, mostly just trying to get them to at least appreciate what's in front of them and how much. Then you can use items that are kind of familiar to them. So compact disc would be about the size a pancake should be. Half a baseball, not a softball, but a baseball, is about a half a cup. So when you're looking at rice, pasta, beans, that could be used. Cassette tape, I don't know how many people use or know about cassette tapes. Maybe younger kids won't, but older adults would be about the size of a slice of bread. Bar soap, piece of cornbread. Let's see others up there. I usually tell people with dried fruit or nuts, I usually say what would fit in the hollow of your palm of your hand. They use an egg. They use dice. Dice are really good for cubes of cheese. So there, 1.5 ounces of cheese would be 4 dice. Let's see, what else do they have up there? I don't know how many people, ping pong ball, they use for 2 tablespoons of peanut butter. Okay? So common objects, relating that to them, will help them in terms of choosing, especially if they're not going to measure, at least have an eyeball. Questions about those? Comments? How many of you measure your food? The women, okay. Men, you ever measure your food?
No, today I did.
You did? If assignment-wise, okay. That's, all right. Okay, so let's look at vegetables. With fruits and vegetables, think rainbow. Easy to teach your patients. Fill up your basket with the rainbow. Get one from all the different colors. It's visually appealing. It also gives you a variety of nutrition as well. So here it says to use, that the recommendation is 2 1.5 cup equivalents. Don't worry about those. That is what the guidelines say. Think in terms of 5 to 9 servings, and think in that half cup or full cup range. So these are great in terms of fiber. A lot of your good vitamins come from vegetables, so A, C, K, E, the B vitamins. A lot of your minerals, and some of the more unusual ones, copper, magnesium, folate is a big one with vegetables. In vegetables. Iron, manganese, choline. Choline also in eggs, very high source. It is a carbohydrate and a protein source. So for every serving of vegetables you have, you get about 2 grams of protein. So it's one of the ways that vegetarians get their protein. It's a small amount, but it still is a good source. 5 grams of carbs for a half-cup serving cooked, full, and a cup of raw is 5 grams. You'll need to know those things when you are evaluating your own diet. 1 serving, okay, I've got that all up there. All right. Oops. One thing is to differentiate between starchy and non-starchy vegetables. So starchy vegetables, you probably can name them, and you're also looking at the screen. So potatoes, usually people know. Corn, usually people know. But others would be English peas. When you talk to people about peas, designating it that way because they're different from the other peas. The winter squashes, so not summer squash, but the like butternut, acorn, pumpkin, sweet potatoes. So they tend to be fleshier. They are different. You can see they're different from like a green bean or asparagus. It's important for patients to differentiate because these are starches. They act more like a bread. They raise blood sugar. They have a lot more calories. So a half a cup of corn has 60 calories. Half a cup of green beans has 25 calories. So it's a big difference. I usually tell patients limit your starchy vegetables to 1 per meal. Fill out the rest with your non-starchy. Don't have corn, mac and cheese, and bread at the same meal, which is kind of a staple where I came from in family medicine. Okay. Dark green, great. High vitamin K. You got somebody on Coumadin, they can out-eat any Coumadin dose you give them if they eat a lot of dark green vegetables. High in fiber, high in folate. So that's one of the things that most Americans are deficient in is folate or folic acid. Good vitamin C, minerals, iron, calcium. You can get hypercalcemic if you eat enough kale. So it's a very good source of calcium. So people who are not going to eat dairy, this is a good source. Comments? Red and orange, A, C, and E. Very good. Potassium, high source. Fiber, high source. High, I say high. Most of the time, serving a vegetable or fruit will get you about 2 to 3 grams. Okay? The recommendation is 25 to 40. So if you eat the 9 servings a day, that'll get you up to 18 to 27 grams of fiber just eating your vegetables and your fruit. Beans and legumes. Okay, so these are great sources. They're cheap, great source of protein, very cheap source of protein. So if people can't if they can't afford meat or choose to avoid it, this is your great source. Legumes are a big class. Beans are a legume, but not all legumes are beans. I put that in there for you. So we tend to use the term bean pretty loosely. So beans refer to the kidney, pinto, white. We usually put bean with it in the term. Lentils are not beans. Peas are not beans. You see the other sources, potassium. It also is good to be aware of what foods will increase potassium because you get into your renal patients and they will be asked to limit them. And then you see the other B vitamins and A, and also the minerals. Questions about those? So these are your bottom. These are your big things that you put into your diet. Fruit. Okay. So fruit, again, think rainbow. Doesn't that look delicious? I usually tell folks, eat your fruit, don't drink them, because you can drink them very fast. You don't get all the fiber, because you usually take the pulp out. And there's lots of calories. Not so much in tomato juice, but any other juice. The other is, if you've never looked at all the juice bottles, just go into the juice aisle and look at the varying amount. You get 100%, it's hard to find 100% juice. But then you might get 10% or 50%. So it will range all over the place. But encourage people to eat fruit instead of drinking it. Part of your 5 to 9 servings every day, it is more calorically high, it's high in carbs. So 5 grams and a half a cup of vegetables, 15 and a half a cup of fruit. It's all sugar. Now, it's good, patients can perceive it's good, they may eat a lot of it. There's even a dietary group they call the fruitarians, and all they eat is fruit. Also a good source of fiber, again about 2 to 3 grams per serving. Good vitamin C, very high in potassium. Who had a, Julie, you had a question? Did I see a hand? Okay. All right. You know your kilocalories? So carbs are how much of their calories amount. 1 gram equals how many? 4. Usually we use 4. Protein is what? 1 gram is 4. And fat? 9. Okay, you need those to figure do your analysis as well. Okay. Grains. Okay. Lots of grains. Anybody use amaranth? Nope. Buckwheat? Some buckwheat. Barley? I use barley, I put it in my soups. Millet? That's what I feed to the birds. I didn't know you ate millet. In what? Kind bars has, yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. Oats. There's a ton of them. Quinoa, rice, sorghum. That's where I come from in Missouri. We raise a lot of sorghum, a lot of milo. Teff is it's an Ethiopian, it's kind of the red one. This one from Africa. I think this is the triticale. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Anybody ever use it? Say it.
Triticale.
What do they use that for? Do you know?
We grow it for
Feed?
grass for feed.
Feed. It's a very large, and it's much larger than wheat, higher producer than wheat. Wonder why we don't use it. Is it, I don't know, have you ever cooked with it or had anything from
We
it?
mix it with like radishes to feed our cattle.
Okay. Then the different types of wheat, smelt is here. You see they look fairly similar, wheat, farro, so lots of different kinds. Okay. So the term grains can be used as a single, referring to the ingredient or to the food group or to an ingredient. So we talked about whole grains and refined grains. So whole grains have the kernel on them, the endosperm, they have the fiber with them. Refined grains strip that all away. And so that's why they're called refined. If they're enriched, some things have been added back to them. So that's why we would like people to use whole grain, whole rice. If you ever look at the difference in them, they still got the husk on them. So they are considered a more nutrient-rich food. Recommended amount is 48 grams per day. We talked about that yesterday. Here's the words you may see on a package. Whole grain, whole wheat, they'll name the grain. Stone ground, whole, brown rice, oats, oatmeal. And that means that you're getting all the parts of the grain. So those are good words to look for. And there's the stamp we talked about yesterday. So a whole grain is 16 grams or more per serving, or if they don't have the 100% stamp, they contain some whole grain and some refined grains. Okay, so look at for 48 grams of whole grains every day. If you look on the next page, page 5, health benefits. This is for Zane because he loves evidence. So lower risk. So in people who eat, and usually they're looking at like, I'm not making fun of you. You always ask for it, so I kind of identified that with you. So for, here they've looked at it like in cardiovascular, or they're looking at some other endpoint, but they've also taken in a diet history. So this one comes out of Circulation a couple of years ago, or last year. So eating more whole grains showed a lower risk of death from all-cause, heart disease, and cancer. And that was in people who ate at least 30 grams a day. It's not hard to eat 30 grams a day. Most of the time, if you find a fairly dense food that's dense in it, and I'll show you some examples, you can meet that. Lower risk of heart disease, cancer, all-cause death, with more grains in people who had diabetes, or preventing infectious disease or death from all causes in a British Medical Journal. So I went to my pantry and looked for these grain stamps. So here's what I found. So Triscuits reduced fat crackers, 25 grams per whole grain, and a serving is 6 crackers, so it's not hard. High fiber Quaker oatmeal, 29 grams per whole per serving, and that's about a half a cup. And then the bread that I use, Alpine Valley, 12 grain bread, 12 grams or more per slice. So it doesn't take a lot to incorporate these into your diet if you're not using them or not paying attention to them at this point. Okay, fiber. So this is also one of your assignments, is to see how much fiber you're eating in your diet. So the recommended amount is varies, 25 to 40. 90% of Americans do not make that. We're not a very fiber rich diet, Western diet. That you'll also see it termed as the amount of fiber per calories that you take in. On a label, they have done that daily intake based on 11.5 grams per 1,000 calories. This one, the healthy guidelines look at 14 grams per 100,000. There is a lot of interest now in the gut microbiome. It's thought that a lot of diseases are maybe due, or the increase in incidence is due to changes in the gut flora. Diabetes is looking at this, so there's lots of interest right now in looking at what is the normal gut. What should the normal gut look like? What kinds of foods can we eat to restore that microbiome? And fiber is one of them that helps for a healthy gut. So this is one of those that has to be on the label. Lots of foods are high in fiber. Gave you a list there. Your vegetables and fruits, your grains are going to be high. Your beans are probably going to be one of your highest. They're usually about 7 grams per serving. But also your nuts, chia seeds have a lot, flaxseed. So lots of foods that you can combine to get to that fiber content. Can't eat a lot of processed foods and get there. Can't eat a lot of fast foods and get there. It's hard to do. Comments about fiber? Okay. Dairy. So dairy, cheeses, milks, yogurts, those are the most common. A lot of vegetarians avoid dairy. Other people avoid dairy. It's gotten some bad press in terms of increasing inflammation. Anybody in here avoid dairy? Some of you do. Like intolerant of it, or for dietary
My
purposes?
husband is, so I just don't eat it either.
Okay, Bonnie? No. Just avoid milk? Okay. So this is a common group, a food group that people will avoid either because it upsets their stomach, they can't tolerate it. So asking about that and looking for other ways for people to get at least their vitamin or their calcium is important. Soy beverages are usually fortified, so they will have that added. Milk is fortified with calcium, usually and vitamin D. The amounts vary based on the age. So looking at those 2 cup equivalents for kids, 2 to 3, 2.5 cup equivalents for kids 4 to 8, and then 3 cup equivalents for adolescents and adults. That goes mostly at the amount of calcium. So you will be calculating the calcium intake of your 24-hour when you do it. So pay attention to those. Those are going to provide, your dairy will provide a good source of protein, and in some sources it is fairly inexpensive. So a good protein source, usually a good fat source, and usually also a good carb source. So they're usually balanced in terms of macronutrients. Next page, this is what I gave you in the osteoporosis handout to estimate your calcium intake and also your vitamin D. So pretty good sources of calcium in the diet, not so good with vitamin D. So we were intended to get most of our vitamin D from the sun. So a very light-skinned person should be able to get their vitamin D from 20 minutes of exposure to the sun. The darker your skin, the longer it takes. The darkest skin will take up to 2 hours. But if people who stay out of the sun, like maybe the elderly, or they use a lot of sunscreen, their vitamin D levels are going to be low. So that's why there's been a lot of focus on supplements and can you get it from the food. So there's a few sources. Vitamin D, fortified cereals have vitamin D, milk, cheese, some fish. You can see though, with milk, you're looking at about 98 international units per cup. And then if you look down at the amount that's recommended, 400 to 800, you'd have to take in a lot. That's why the sun is important. Most people don't eat or drink enough in order to get their entire vitamin D from their diet. Okay, I'm going to finish up protein, then we'll take a break. So protein should be about 20% of intake for adults. Kids may need more. People who are in a catabolic state, they have had surgery or a major infection, or some type of major trauma where they're rebuilding a lot of tissue, they may need more protein. But for the most part, adults need about 0.8 grams per kilo per day. You might write that down. 0.8 grams per kilo per day. I've given it to you in the past, but I didn't put it in this handout. Protein can come from a variety of forms. Animal, we all think that, meats, fowl, fish, all of those can provide, but also others, nuts, seeds, beans, very good source. Vegetables to a limited source. For the most part, vegetarians can meet it with their intake, and most adults who consume meats or other sources of protein usually way exceed that. Eggs are a good source of protein. The albumin is a very high quality, cheap source of protein. And then also dairy. If you look on the next page, it gives you some things that the different proteins provide. So meats give you most of your zinc. Zinc we use a lot in terms of skin. Skin integrity, skin healing requires zinc. Poultry, you get a lot of your niacin from, one of the B vitamins. Our iron comes from that. So we see when we get to vegetarian that we're going to have a problem because they don't take that in. So that becomes a problem more in a vegan or very strict vegetarian diet. Seafood, B12, vitamin D. Those fish are sunning and they're soaking it up. Eggs are a good source of choline. Nuts and seeds, vitamin E. And soy, copper, manganese, iron, as well as the legumes. Questions to this point? Did you learn anything you didn't know? Aren't you glad you got out of bed and got here? Okay, let's take a break. We'll be back a little after 9.